Vice Chancellor for Enrollment. Also, business is back in a big way in South San Francisco. In fact, it never really disappeared. Why the industrial city is doing so well, and are there takeaways for its struggling bigger neighbor up north, San Francisco? Our media partners at the San Francisco Standard will be here to answer those questions. But first, a potential game changer in the fight against cancer. After once giving up on the possibility of developing vaccines to prevent cancer, new research is giving doctors hope. Joining us live now is Dr. Sachet Shukla, assistant professor at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas, who directs a cancer vaccine program there. Dr. Shukla, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is a big wow, because until now, the best we could hope for in the fight against cancer is really just effective treatments that increase our chances of winning. But you're telling me that it's not a dream, that it is possible to develop a vaccine against cancer. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. So if you think about the immune system, the way it is built, right? We've had, I think most people don't realize, but vaccines have been the single most successful public health campaign in human history. We have effectively wiped out diseases in humanity, right? So the immune system is the same, and using the same kinds of principles, we can now actually train the immune system to specifically recognize cancer cells, especially in the earliest stages when they are just getting formed, or potentially even before they are fully formed into the pre-cancerous states, and address it at that stage. So yes, this is seeming less like a dream and more like a reality in sometime in the near future, hopefully.
Wow. Before we get into, and I really want to dive into exactly how it will work in the body, tell me, which types of cancers are you hoping to develop vaccines for?
Right. So the essential idea is tumor agnostic, meaning that the immune system, does not really make too much of a difference between let's say a breast cancer tissue versus a brain cancer tissue versus, a leukemia for that matter, a blood cancer. Mm-hmm. What the immune system cares about is what is different from the self, right? Mm-hmm. So that is what what drives the immune system. If you think about an infection, how does the immune system know that we need to go after this infected cell? So what happens is when a cell gets infected, an otherwise healthy cell, when it's infected with a virus, like the COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which we've been dealing with, or the flu virus for that matter, or a bacteria, these infected cells raise red flags that the immune system is able to identify and launch an attack against. In cancer, the same thing happens, except it's not an external infection, at least, for the vast majority of non-virally driven cancers, but essentially changes that happen within the cancer, which we call mutations, that now raise very similar red flags that the immune system can recognize. So in theory, this can work. A vaccine approach could really work across a broad spectrum of cancers. But we have to understand that the kinds of red flags that will be raised by different cancers will be different, right? So we'll have to build different vaccines for different kinds of cancers.
I know initially, anyway, the New York Times article talked about real hope for pancreatic, colon, and breast cancers. Of course, we know pancreatic is so very deadly, and colon breast cancer is quite common. They're among the leading killers in terms of cancers. How quickly could this come true, so to speak? And if it were to happen, how many deaths do you think we can prevent out of the 600,000 cancer deaths we have in the U.S. each year?
So that is a loaded question. How soon can this happen? Well, we like to be cautiously optimistic. Right now the trials are underway, and I think the field has come a long way from. We've been trying cancer vaccines for a while, and actually, we do have an approved preventive vaccine, the Hpv vaccine, right, which prevents against cervical, a whole host of cancers, including cervical cancer, but also other kinds of cancers, anal cancers, etc., certain kinds of those types of cancers. So we do have an approved preventive cancer vaccine. The question is, can we translate this to other tumor types, right? So the trials are underway now. I think we will learn as we go. it's a little difficult to speculate how soon this can happen. Now, the second part of your question, which is the kind of impact this will have, uh, and this is my personal opinion, but I think the implications are huge, right? Because we've we have been investing a lot in finding a cure, and in the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years, we've made very significant progress in that direction, and we will continue to make direction in that progress. But nothing really beats early detection and preventing cancer in the first place, right? So these two aspects, early detection, there are a number of fantastic efforts that are underway to for early detection of cancers from a very simple blood test, for example. And then based on that, we can then actually have vaccines that can work in a semi-personalized fashion, right? So depending on the kind of cancer and the kind of red flags that the patient has, we can give him that particular vaccine.
I see. I think you read my mind, because I was about to ask you, do you envision these vaccines like, MMR or COVID, where it's recommended that everyone gets it? Or is it people who come to you with a family history of that type of cancer, or if it's the kind of genetic testing which you referred to? What do you think? How broad would it be?
So I think a lot of us will stand to benefit from vaccines. We are specifically talking about the preventive case here, but really vaccines, at least in my mind, are going to emerge as a pillar of cancer care. So if you think about the spectrum, right, the history of the disease, there are people who have genetic predispositions to getting cancer. Then there are patients who have, the precancerous polyps or the precancerous stages of, and roughly 80 to 85% of cancers do have this precancerous stage, which is not quite cancer yet, but there's a very high likelihood that it will become a cancer at some point, right? So you have the precancerous stage, then you have patients who have very early disease, the stage 1, or the, that we call the stage 1 or the stage 2 diseases. Then we have people who've been treated and who are currently cancer free, and this is a huge need, right? Who are at a very high risk of relapsing. And many times when the relapse happens, this is when the cancer is very aggressive and, ends up claiming lives. And then there's the, refractory setting where nothing is working, right? So along the spectrum, I think different formulations, different combinations, right? So vaccines almost by principle will work best when the disease burden is low, right? So that's why, in cases where the patient has a predisposition or is precancerous, where the disease has not really become manifest in a big way and has spread to different parts of the body, that few treatments work well in that setting, and vaccines are no exception. But in cases where the disease burden is low, or it's a very early stage of the disease, or if the patient is at a high risk of relapse, that is the setting where I think cancer vaccines will work most effectively. And in the more advanced stages of the disease, I think vaccines will work or help the outcomes in conjunction with other treatments, right? So you combine it with chemo or with a drug and give a vaccine. The good thing about vaccines, I'll quickly add, is that they are, for the most part, fairly non-toxic, right? So this makes it very attractive. So if you think about breast cancer, right, where people have these precancerous states and they panic, right, naturally, and some of them end up getting really invasive surgeries or chemotherapy or radiations. What if we could replace that with a vaccine that actually effectively take cares, right, which is non-toxic, is relatively cheap, and we are all used to getting vaccines, right? If that can actually take care of the cancer in that very early stage. So I think the potential is huge.
You read my mind again. I was going to ask you about potential side effects or downsides. Dr. Sachet Shukla, thank you so much for this conversation. The research is fascinating, and we do hope it'll become reality sooner rather than later, but please keep us posted.
Will do, and thank you so much for doing this story. I think there's a need for renewed public interest in this field.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, coming up next, folks, a new challenge for CSU, Cal State schools. It involves enrollment, why the numbers are down, and what the university system plans to do about it. Next on Getting Answers. College graduates have lower unemployment rates and earn higher salaries. Indeed.com's survey last year found a high school graduate earned just over $700 weekly, while a four-year college graduate earned just over $1,100 weekly. So why is enrollment drastically down at the largest public university system in the country? We're talking about the Cal State system. Joining us live now is Dr. April Gromo, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management Services for the CSU system. Dr. Gromo, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So how much is enrollment down by?
Well, actually, the good news is that enrollment isn't down by that much. What has happened is that the state of California and the governor, our legislators, have provided us funding for 10,000 more new students at the CSU. In addition, we have our graduation initiative 2025 that we've been working very hard for the last several years to increase our graduation rates, which we've done so successfully. So we have capacity to admit more students into our 23 universities throughout the state of California.
Are you saying that the number of applications that you received the past couple of years do not reflect a downward trend compared to, let's say, 5-10 years ago?
Actually, our applications have consistently gone up for first-time freshmen. What we have seen is a downturn in our transfer applications, and that's really a national thing that is happening with community college enrollment, not only nationally, but at this California community colleges as well.
I see, because it's been widely reported that community college enrollment is down, especially since the pandemic. There are a lot of issues related to that, including affordability, and then just also the challenges logistically, and also questions over the value of a college education. Can you speak to those points as to, I'm sure those are points that you're trying to drive across as you encourage more enrollment in applications?
Well, the CSU and all 23 of our universities are available. We have over 4,000 majors and really capacity and access to provide an excellent quality education to all our students. And as far as affordability goes, the CSU has one of the most affordable tuitions in the country. Our tuition is the same for all 23 campuses. It's important to note that 77% of our students that apply for financial aid has their tuition fully covered. And also 56% of our bachelor's degree students that graduate, they also graduate debt-free.
So do you find yourself talking to students who say, oh, I don't think I can afford to go to SF State, and then you have to remind them, yes, you can, because there's all the support available and assistance?
That's exactly our point, and also one of the reasons I'm here talking to you today. We want to make sure that students understand that a CSU education is of supreme quality and also affordable.
Let me ask you this. President Biden recently relieved student debt working with Congress. I wonder if that also relieves the debt of future incoming students. Is that something that could help drive enrollment?
The debt relief as it stands today is not for future students. It's for students that were currently enrolled or past students. But a lot of CSU graduates and even our current students were eligible for that debt relief.
All right. Well, certainly, I'm sure you're getting the word out to students. I want to also ask you about Governor Newsom and the legislature you mentioned made more money available to the CSU system, both the $1 billion one-time funding and, of course, the increase each year by some $360 million, which is massive. So let me ask you, you said that will allow you to take on tens of thousands more students. What else will that money allow you to do?
So we continue to support students in all areas, not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom with basic needs support, making sure students are eligible for our food pantries. We also continue to make sure that we have mental health counselors and all the support services that students need to be successful, both inside the classroom and outside of the classroom.
Well, now that you have these extra spots available, how will you, I guess, compete for students against the other university systems out there? What are you trying to tell them about CSU?
Well, we are really just trying to share and stress to students that now is the time to apply for our fall 23 admission cycle. So applications opened October 1st and our priority application deadline is November 30th. And we really want students to understand that they can get an excellent four-year education in everything from nursing to engineering to liberal studies to become a teacher and an educator, or even in social work, so that they can really contribute to their future success, their families, and also the communities that they serve.
You know, if you meet the minimum requirements in terms of GPA, are you in? Or is it still selective, especially at some of the campuses in the Bay Area, like San Jose State or Cal State East Bay or SF State in some of the programs?
So all of our campuses have some programs that are a little bit more selective because they get more applications than they have seats available for students. But for the most part, if you meet the minimum eligibility, you would be offered a seat of admission at one of the campuses that you applied to. And if not, we have a program called redirection. So if students don't get admitted to any of the campuses that they applied to, then we redirect them to a campus that has capacity. But San Francisco State, Cal State East Bay in Hayward, Sonoma State, and even San Jose State has lots of capacity in the Bay Area to support students that are interested in attending one of the 23 campuses in this area.
All right, Dr. April Gramo, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management Services at CSU. You got the spots, and the education can be affordable, so check it out. CSU applications open now for next fall. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, South San Francisco paves the way for success after the pandemic, how they're doing it, and what other Bay Area cities may be able to learn. That's next on Getting Answers. Eight.
7, 6, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1.
San Francisco is struggling to fill its downtown vacancies and attracting workers back. But as our media partner, the San Francisco Standard, reports, a neighboring city just down 101 is doing just fine. Thank you very much. And that city is South San Francisco. Joining us live to take a look at why is the Standard staff reporter of the story, Sarah Wright. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Kristen. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. The headline of your story today, while SF's COVID recovery falters, South San Francisco is booming. Before we dive into the how and why it's booming, tell us a little bit about the city, which many people know from the big sign on the side of San Bruno Mountain.
Yeah, so I was actually down there last Wednesday and the streets were alive. The downtown was bustling. There were people eating in restaurants. And all I could think of was, wow, that's not what San Francisco's downtown looks like today. I was down there for a ribbon cutting event for the biotech company Amgen, which is opening a new facility in South San Francisco. And it really just felt like the city had a lot of life. So I decided to look into why.
All right, so why? I mean, it looks booming from the downtown, as you said, right? But what do you think, when you look deeper into it, is actually happening beneath the surface?
Yeah, so South San Francisco has a couple of advantages, a couple of things going for it. So first off, it is in a pretty prime location. It's got the benefit of being close to San Francisco while also being a little bit smaller. And so it benefits from that, especially during the pandemic. It's also close to major transportation hubs. It's got San Francisco Airport, it's got a bunch of BART stops, and it's kind of on the way to large institutions like Stanford. But the real reason that I uncovered was, biotechnology is the main industry in South San Francisco, and that industry didn't take as hard of a hit as regular technology did during the pandemic. So a lot of those companies decided to stay open. They needed to keep their workers in person throughout the pandemic. And today they're renewing leases and they're building new facilities because they're betting on the future of South San Francisco.
Right. And when you talk biotech, can't forget the biggest employer there, Genentech, a leading biotech company, which we have video of. And as we show that, I want to ask you why you think biotech has turned out to be perhaps a more COVID-resistant industry for a city to have rather than, say, tech, right, which dominated San Francisco.
Yeah, so what the biotech companies told me is that, their work wasn't interrupted quite as much as the regular technology sector. They were still doing research and development during the pandemic at an even faster pace, knowing the importance of their work during something like a global pandemic. They had workers coming in person, and the industry really grew a lot over the last couple of years. And, they told me that they want to stay in South San Francisco because that's where the talent is. And that's where you have access to, people working on the tech side in San Francisco and people working on life sciences down in Silicon Valley. So uniting those two things, literally and physically in the city of South San Francisco, where there's already this big pool of talent, just makes a lot of sense.
So what benefits have South San Francisco derived from this strong industry and tax base?
So South San Francisco has a pretty strong partnership with its industries. The city charges things like development impact fees. So every time that, Genentech or any large company wants to expand its campus or build a new campus, build some labs or build housing, for example, for their workers, South San Francisco is able to capture taxes basically from that development. And those taxes go to things like parks, libraries, they go to housing development. And so the folks at the city told me that they really encourage this kind of development. And, they really want to make the things like the permitting process as easy as possible to get this stuff done.
And I guess that leads me to my last question, which is, are these unique factors you cited things that, they're lucky to have, but other cities can't really replicate? Or are there policy things that bigger, struggling cities like San Francisco can learn from and borrow?
Yeah, so there's, on the first hand, just the advantage of South San Francisco not being a major city. We saw during the pandemic, big cities losing, suburbs winning. But the things that San Francisco could learn from its neighbors to the south are things like making permitting easy or trying to derive benefits from commercial building as opposed to housing building. There's also the opportunity to diversify San Francisco's sectors that are downtown. Today, we still have about 30% of San Francisco's office space is dedicated to technology. So if they were able to branch out to things like biotech even, that could prove more resilient in the future.
All right, Sarah, good reporting, good conversation. Thanks so much. And folks,
Thank you.
You're welcome. You can check out more of the San Francisco Standard's other original reporting on their website, sfstandard.com. ABC7 will continue to bring you more segments featuring the Standard's city-focused journalism. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us for Getting Answers today. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. Coming up on ABC 7 News at 4, another high-rise flood in San Francisco. Details just coming in after the building flooded overnight. We'll have that on ABC 7 News at 4. Bye-bye.